episode of Bitcoin Live. Today with me in the show is none other than TheMarjan. Welcome to Bitcoin Live.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I should mention I usually live in New York City, but I'm upstate in the mountains of New York State. That's why I have this backdrop. But yeah,
Well, fresh air, that's good, right? So,
back to the city tomorrow. But yeah, it's 10 feet of snow outside, and I'm in the mountains. Yeah,
it, it, it looks very rustic. So,
it's very
I'm
rustic.
I'm soon heading to the Ardennes, which is close to Belgium, and so I'm sort of, getting in the mood for that setting. So it looks perfect to me.
Yeah, it's actually I've been out in the snow a lot. I was been snowshoeing, and we got about 15. We came up Thursday night, and we got 15 inches of snow in 24
Wow.
hours. It was like a blizzard, and it
Wow.
stopped now, but we're gonna get out tomorrow morning before more snow comes, so we can get back to New York City before we get trapped again.
Well, it sounds perfect, like a perfect sort of Christmas setting. And yeah, this is, by the way, for the people listening, this is our last show, and then we'll take a 2-week Christmas or sort of holiday break. So this is a very special episode. We have a very special artist in the show. TheMarjan is really amazing. She's a very prolific artist. We're going to show a little bit of what she makes and maybe a lot more. And we're also going to touch upon the situation in Iran and a lot of other interesting stuff. So hang in there and get ready for getting your mind blown. Because for the people who don't know you, you have been on Bitcoin Live before, but it's been a while. Can you sort of give an introduction of who you are?
I'm a digital artist and an animator, known mostly for my, original and unique style of figuration and animation in 3D CG. I'm a pioneering digital artist. My first exhibited computer art piece was done on a Commodore 64 back in 1984. And since then, I've done many different collections of digital fine arts, which I've exhibited in galleries, festivals, museums, etc. And a lot of these bodies of work that I've done in collections have explored the post-human figure through various different, novel approaches in 3D CG. And in 2016, I started a conceptual net art project called Art Hacks by hacking my art into found and shot exhibition footage on the internet as a way of radicalizing curation, democratizing the exhibition space, and also redefining form for digital art. Since then, I've been doing the art hacks during the art fairs as they happen live, and several of the art hacks that I've done have gone, viral with millions of views on the internet. Most notably, Basel in Mary Boone and Glassish and Waxish, which was renamed Gallery Day by Nownish, or The Kiss, which has been shared widely many times. And of course, the first feminist art piece with viral metrics, The Glitch Goddess of Art Basel, Miami. And then sometime around 2020, I came into the NFT space and started to mint my art and sell it on first super rare, and then since then on multiple different platforms. And I was in the first IRL museum exhibition of NFT art, proof of art, a brief history of digital art, at in Linz, Austria, at the Francisco Carolinum in Linz, Austria. And I was also in the BBC documentary Art Goes Digital. I was the only female artist between Beeple and Xcopy. I've been Adobe Artist in Resident, Forbes' Best of AR list. I've been selling into some of the top collections on various platforms. Been doing a lot of NFT and crypto art shows. And also, what else am I leaving out? Yeah, actually, recently I did 2 generative NFT collections for social impact that we can talk about a little later. But that's it. But, I continue to also do IRL art commissions as well. I've done a lot of physical large-scale sculpture this last year from my 3D CG figures as public art. So that's been happening. And I also do a lot of AR art. I've been doing a lot of AR for museums and galleries and as public art commissions in recent years too. So I continue with, a lot of AR projects as well.
So prolific doesn't really cover it.
Yeah.
So But I'm gonna show people a glimpse of what you make. It's really amazing stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah, yes, that's
here
it.
it is. Wow.
Yeah, I had actually I muted on my end because I think it was like I heard like a feedback delay thing, but anyways.
Oh yeah, I think that was the case, right?
Yeah, that's why I muted because I realized, wait a minute, I'm hearing the audio with a delay, and I think that was from my speakers feeding back into yours. So yeah, so that's
Yeah.
what we have to do when we show the video. I have to mute. Okay.
No, no, no problem, no problem. And I think the people who are watching, like they really sort of they get a sense of the amazing stuff that you make, and the sort of the interplay that you do with VR, AR, reality, displacement, and also the life hacks that you sort of mentioned. And you got this whole philosophy behind your art, which I really love. And we always try to get these sort of trailblazer artists, NFT artists on the show. And I know calling you an NFT artist doesn't do you justice, right? Because you've been way before NFTs into digital art. So but you are definitely a trailblazer, and you're pushing the boundaries of what is possible and sort of reaching people in different ways. And I really love that about you. Can you tell us a little bit about the philosophy that sort of motivates you?
Well, yeah, I think that I think what I do is really the best way to describe it is avant-garde 3D CG. And it's interesting because it's or avant-garde digital art because I feel like so much of postmodernism was sort of based on this assumption that everything that could possibly be explored visually had already been explored through painting and sculpture. And modernism kind of was the final deconstruction of all of that. So with postmodernism, there was a shift towards de-skilling in the arts, especially the visual components, towards the ephemeral, etc. But to me, this century and our moment is the exact opposite because it's about almost a renaissance as we discover entire worlds of aesthetics outside of painting and sculpture that are waiting to be explored. And so that's kind of where I come from because I'm really using the technology to find those new aesthetics. And to me, you have to sort of go beyond what I call a simulation tutorial gone wrong. You have to go beyond. Here's the smoke man who turns to water, or here's the water man who splashes and melts. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but to me, those are kind of like early experiments, but I like to go further. And I think my art practice is very informed on the one hand by art history, but also media history, like cinema, photography, history of animation, and CG. So I call my technique of animation chronometric sculpture because it's really about moving sculpture and my best animation, like my ideal in animation is I should be able to print every frame and have it deliver, whether it's like a 2D print on a wall or a 3D sculpture. Like that's kind of what I aim for. But I also look to go beyond the physical. Like we've changed. We're so post-internet at this point and so post-digital that like the question is, what are we? We're sort of straddling mixed reality 24/7 between mobile and physical. So that's changing us. And a lot of times the bodies that I work with are about exploring how is being changing now that we're not just in the physical, but also the metaverse, also the digital. And so I'm really, if you look at art history, every major era of art history has had styles of artistic figuration that define that era. You look at the earlier part of the 20th century, you very much see the deconstruction of realistic classical figures into very contemporary language of design, language of early mass media, language of, you know, a lot of the changes that were happening in the earlier part of the 20th century. So I feel like that's where I'm at, but with the 21st century and everything that's happening in terms of the digital, the virtual, and the internet. So that's kind of where I come from. And I deal sometimes with feminist themes. But, you know, recently I did The Glitch Gods, which was exploring the post-human male. And I actually had a lot of fun with those. We'll look at those in a little while. But so the idea is it's like, it's not just men, women who are changing, men are changing, and we're all changing. But what are these, you know, what are these changes? And I think that sort of creative stream of consciousness flow I use when I'm animating is really trying to tap into the collective unconscious of our moment. Like, where are we heading? What are we becoming? What has happened to us? And sometimes it's the artistic aesthetics that give us that snapshot and understanding in all those ways that words and articles that really can't capture.
Yeah, so what you make also sort of really resonates with Marshall McLuhan, like the medium is the message, but it also sort of reminds me of, you know, that art is coalescing and then it's dispersing again. It's sort of like a briefing, right? It's coming together and then it's breaking apart again. We're now in this phase where things are sort of fragmenting, and you are sort of picking up these fragments and building something new out of them, searching sort of like a new meaning from these pieces that are sort of yeah,
Yeah,
dispersed.
yeah, there is a new meaning. And, you know, I'm not sure what it is, but I know that my art practice is about exploring it. And a lot of times I get insights. And then I notice from people's comments on my work that they're getting it too, because of what they're saying. So it's almost like we're all following the same thread. You know, it's like the best part of internet art is like, you know, I make the art that I make, and it's like a wave I send out. And then the comments come back. And I always say, for me, the comments are like a whole other process of discovery, as people make me aware of things that I wasn't consciously aware of when I was creating the piece. So I think that's the best part of the internet and internet art.
Well, you know, I was just having a sort of discussion about, you know, Twitter, and you know, Twitter's also sort of going through a phase,
My
a
niece,
very interesting phase.
actually, I'm Team Elon Musk. By the way, I did a lot of the early important pieces of the early internet. I mean, not only did I work in New York Silicon Alley in 1995 and 96, but I was a featured artist for .com Gallery, an international forum for the digital arts sponsored by Prodigy back in 1996. And that was the first commercial art gallery on the internet, backed by the #2 biggest internet company then. So, you know, I have a history that goes that with the internet 1.0. So I'm very much like, I believe in the free and open internet. I mean, to
Yeah.
me, the idea of the convergence of the security state and technology is the most dystopian science fiction novel of all time. I mean, I can't imagine anything more terrifying. And it's the fact that it actually happened based on the recent, you know, Twitter files from Matt Taibbi, to me is like, you know, I mean, I don't know. As an American, I'm horrified that the FBI was censoring, you know, people with like 100 followers doing comedy on Twitter. I mean, come on. I mean, this
Yeah.
should not be happening in America. And this should not be happening on the internet, #1. And it should not be happening in America, #2. So I feel as if we all have to fight to preserve the ideals of the internet. Because if we don't, it's pretty much over.
You know, that is completely sort of the Bitcoin Live ethos, and that's also why we are called Bitcoin Live, right? Because we believe in life, and we believe in Bitcoin, and we believe these sort of things are sort of enhancing each other, right? Because I think life is decentralized in essence, and I think that's something you also believe in. And Bitcoin Life is the sort of decentralizing force within technology, right? I think if you sort of boil down Bitcoin to its essence, right, it's basically a big decentralizing vortex.
No, I
That's
agree.
what
I
it
mean,
does.
a lot of the people that I meet in the crypto and Web 3.0 space are actually very aligned with that ideology of, the only way that Web 2.0 is like we have to move beyond it, and the way to really take the free and open internet ideals to the next level is through decentralization. We saw what centralization does with social media and the big tech platforms with Web 2.0, and it's now time to open it up, democratize it, decentralize it. And I think that a lot of the I think decentralizing finance is the key to making sure power is not too concentrated with oligarchies. And I think the whole world needs it. And as a netizen, as a citizen of the world, we all have to make sure that that's the direction we're moving in as a counterweight to all the attempts at controlling every aspect of our private lives.
And I think your sort of art, or people like you who make this amazing art, that sort of goes along with this new vision, right? I think it's sort of um, it's like this fragmentation and decentralization that is also sort of reflected in the amazing art that you make, and that's sort of pushing the boundaries between the artificial and the digital, and also reality on the other hand, right? So it's sort of breaking apart these sort of boundaries that sort of kept the system together. And the system at the moment is very unhealthy, right? It needs to be broken apart in order to get air in there.
You know,
And to
it's it's interesting because I just saw a Harris Harvard poll showing that 2/3 of Americans actually believe Twitter was shadow banning and
yeah,
censoring, and two
we
thirds
won.
two-thirds of Americans want laws to prevent corporations from doing that. The poll just came out 2, 3 days ago. And I read that and I was like so happy to hear that my fellow Americans are actually freaking out because you don't see or hear about it in mainstream media. I mean, I'm on the free and open internet. So I'm on Substack. I'm on, I look at a lot of heterodox sources of information and alternative media. And so I'm aware of it. But it was good to know that 2/3 of my fellow Americans are also just as concerned as I am. But it
Yeah,
just makes you realize so much of the mainstream media is disconnected from the reality of what most people are thinking and experiencing.
plus it's almost like the mainstream media is following Wall Street, which is also becoming way more disconnected from Main Street, right? Because you
Yeah, I
know,
mean, look at the way they treated SBF and FTX as if it was nothing. I mean, any halfway objective person, looking at this situation of frauding millions of people out of billions of dollars would not look at this as, oh, here's a nice guy who made a mistake. I mean, you have to wonder about the New York Times and like, do people who read this possess any type of objective, rational thinking or any type of empirical thinking? Because there's no way you could look at this type of coverage and not just be horrified at the complete lack of acknowledgement of what is obvious to everyone. This is fraud on a scale we haven't seen in decades.
yeah, it is. It's insane, actually, and I also find it very strange that sort of people who are. It's very strange to see. It's almost like you're looking from the outside in, with the people who are sort of still enraptured with the mainstream media, how they're sort of experiencing all of this, right? Because you almost feel like an alien sometimes when you're not into the mainstream narrative, and you're looking at it from the outside, and you're talking to these people. Sometimes, I mean, they're really nice people, but
On some levels, we're all living in a Philip K. Dick novel.
yeah, yeah, something like that.
It's really a testament to how appreciated his work was. I mean, as much as I'm a fan of cyberpunk and William Gibson and see elements of Gibson in our world, I have to say it's Philip K. Dick that's turning out to have been the more accurate predictor of the future on some
But
levels.
but I think you also have like to have a very artistic soul to sort of look on the outside in order to see the inside, right? So you have to sort of go around it.
Well, I think as an artist, especially a pioneering artist, an innovative artist, and as an avant-garde artist, I'm used to thinking outside the box. I'm used to independent thinking. I'm used to freedom. I allow myself a great deal of freedom in my intellectual and artistic pursuits. I'm also a heterodox thinker. So these things are natural for me. I'm used to them. I've always been a rebel. I've always been a nonconformist. And so I'm still a rebel. I'm still a nonconformist because that's who I am. And if you look at my art, you'll see it. So it's just an extension of who I am. But I think things are also changing. You know, a year ago, because my day job is I'm a tenured full professor of digital art and XR. And a year ago during class, I think there was something involving Twitter censorship, and I raised concerns about censorship, and maybe one other student agreed with me, and everybody else had nothing to say about it. And literally about a month ago during a class break, we're all in the computer labs, and one of the students this is before Elon Musk bought Twitter. She asked me what I thought about Twitter censorship, and I told her, I said, this really concerns me, and I went down the list, and suddenly half the students who were in the lab joined in with their concerns, and I'm like, wow, things have really changed in a year, where students are just going like, this is so wrong. And so I feel like it's strange, but I'm seeing a lot more people get radicalized as a college professor. But I don't see that reflected in mainstream media coverage of young people. Like you would never know there are young people who are very concerned about free speech and civil liberties because the media will not tell you about them. But I'm discovering there's a lot, and amongst my own students. And so there is this disconnect between what the mainstream media tells us is happening and what I experience as a college professor in New York City dealing with young people.
But do you also think that that's like this is that coming apart that you see within your class then in that regard, that because of the mainstream media, the message that they're sort of pushing out, that it's sort of
I
it's
think
falling apart.
I think polls show that trust in mainstream media is the lowest it's ever been
Yeah.
in the United States. So I think the majority of Americans don't trust mainstream media based on data. And I'm very data oriented because, I think if I want to be factual, I know as an artist, I live in my imagination. But when I want to be factual, I look at objective data. So I look at polls. So I don't look at what media tells me where the culture is at. I look at polls and data science of that kind to figure out where the culture is at. And yes, trust in mainstream media is like at the lowest it's ever been since they've been polling and surveying it.
But then you also get the polarization, right? Because when sort of the coherent message,
Polarization. I think the polarization is the result of social media, the bubbles we get stuck in, the way the hate engagement,
yeah.
and the way hate engagement gets us to become polarized, and hate metrics drive a great deal of that type. So I think a lot of that has to do with the nature of engagement on social media, what gets eyeballs, and what to some extent drives ad revenue.
Yeah. But do you also think it might also come from sort of the narrative, the mainstream narrative falling apart?
Maybe. I mean, maybe. I think a lot of it. Well, that's a good point. I think when people lose trust
Yeah.
in the system, there's greater anxiety and there's greater fear, and that fear creates tribalism and polarization of the kind you're speaking of. So yeah, definitely.
And your art is sort of to jar people, to make them awake, right? To sort of put something in between in order for them to say, huh, what was that, right? So what is that sort of engagement that you try to create with your art?
Well, I mean, I don't aim. I'm not consciously aware of engagement on that level. I mean, to me, the engagement aspect is a smaller aspect. I always feel like I'm looking for something, and that something I'm looking for is not something I really understand. So I bring a lot of the socio. I mean, a lot of my art hacks have a lot of socio-political themes in them, and the comments on the internet clearly show people are aware of the dialogue I'm having. And I deal with politics. I deal with socio political issues, with identity issues, with what's going on at a particular time. But I'm not. But I always say I'm not interested in the clickbait. I'm not interested in the 800-piece blog piece article about it. I'm interested in something deeper and more profound. And so for that, I have to like just kind of be open and dig deep. And I don't always know what I'm going to hit. So past a certain point, I have to let go of the idea of engagement. Because if I think about it, a lot of the things that I put in my art hacks, I wouldn't do because I would be too concerned about, oh, what is this going to do? So I don't. I shut down that part of my conscious mind that's evaluating and thinking because I wouldn't be as free, you know I mean I could back off from a lot of things because I don't want to deal with the repercussions. But if I want to keep an open mind and find the substantial profound dialogue underneath all of these events and changes and transformations that we in our world is going through, I have to let go of fear of repercussions and things of that kind. So I really do shut down a big part of my cognitive thinking side and just sort of go to almost a nonverbal place where I deal with symbols and I deal with symbols and ideas on the one hand, but also aesthetics on the other hand. So I don't. I try not to think about engagement when I'm working.
But that's basically more where I was going, because when you sort of leave the area of language behind yourself, and when you sort of stop self-censoring yourself because of the fear of losing engagement, or getting engagement, or getting these clicks and views, that's actually when you sort of reach most people, and when you reach them at a more deeper and profound level, but also when you sort of force them to reflect, right? I mean, that when you get them out of their comfort zone, and that they have to engage with your art on a deeper
You,
level. That's basically what I was getting at.
you bring up a really good point. I know that aspects of the profound, whether it was in poetry or art or performance art, throughout my life has sustained me. You know, as I've gone through difficult experiences or just regular life experiences. So it's been a necessary companion, if you may, for me throughout my life, and an important part of my sense making apparatus as a human being, how I make sense of everything personally and globally. And I think there's so much of our culture is kind of framed by the superficial aspects of clickbait and internet culture, that most people are starving for the profound. So a lot of times when I create this art and put it on the internet, is I'm trying to create that profound space for reflection, where no, I don't have an answer like this to give you of what is right and what is wrong and who's right and who's not. No, it's about going deeper, looking at all the things that are affecting us, but then going deeper. And that's where everybody has to find their own meaning and understanding in their own individual way, which might be very different than mine. But exactly, I aim for the lower level. Well, I don't know if lower level is the right word, but the deeper levels.
Yeah.
And actually, that's why I think so many people comment and connect with the work. My metrics on Instagram and Facebook are really strong. Not on Twitter. I don't think Twitter has a good art algorithm. I think it has a good algorithm for people who socialize and do the back and forth with each other. Whereas I think Instagram and Facebook actually has a much better art algorithm. I don't think TikTok is a good art algorithm at all. So I'd say both Instagram and Facebook. I mean, as much as people don't want to admit it, you have to admit it. They have much better art algorithms in terms of being able to see good art. I see a lot better art on Instagram and Facebook than I do on Twitter.
Well, despite all the hate going to Zuckerberg, I have never run into censorship issues on Facebook. To be honest, right, on a personal level, and I can be quite critical, but I've never been banned on Facebook. But I've been banned on YouTube, Twitter. Um, where else? I've been banned on multiple platforms for doing this show, right? So not really crazy stuff or something, but I've never been banned on Facebook. So
Yes. Interesting. Okay,
yeah.
so let's go back to talking about some art.
Yeah. I'm gonna show your another piece of you,
Okay.
of your art, I should say. Here we go. Let's make it bigger.
Oh, that's older. I think that's my reel from 2009 to 2015.
You want to see a more recent piece? It's a
Yeah,
current.
actually, yeah. Hold on. Let me just show the stuff I've been. Actually, you know what? Let me just show. Actually, yeah, that's the Instagram. Yeah, and I'm actually going to show my desktop. And let me just quickly come to. Can you see my desktop?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is actually my super rare, and as you can see, these are all the sold NFTs since I came into the space, and these are all animations, by the way. And this one actually is a GLB, so it's a 3D animated sculpture. I just recently showed this um, in the Simulacra New Metaverse. Although I've also exhibited that at Art Week in Decentraland last August. And
Nice.
this one is actually Gaia, the Metaverse. I did this as a commission for the World Economic Forum, UN, and World of Women NFT to as a philanthropic piece to fund the Green Wall of Africa. I'll just quickly play this. I don't know how well it's going.
Yeah, it's doing good. Wow.
And
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah, actually, the sort of lesser known piece I have. I mean, some of my this is actually my glitch goddess in pink. Why don't we take a look at it?
I think there's also a lot of AI going on there, right?
No, actually, this is well. First of all, the whole idea with the glitch goddess is that she glitches existing ideas, existing conventions in art history that depict the female form in a singular manner. I'll just keep the audio off. So she goes from slender to heavy to pregnant to young to old to stylized to abstract to glitched, and in this sort of continuous, state of constant flux and change in this sort of body, which on the one hand is posthumanism for me, aesthetically speaking. On the other hand, it's also my technique of chronometric sculpture that I mentioned, and it's also how we are. I mean, we're changing. You're looking at the whole world in your hand on your phone while sitting in a room. So we're all undergoing rapid, dramatic changes in terms of being as a result of inhabiting this mixed reality state. So I think that for me, it's another aspect of it. I do sometimes use AI in textures or background elements. But most of the time, what I do actually is the technique that I use mixes post to post animation with dynamics, with simulations, this is by Lord S, one of my favorite pieces, with the dynamics, with simulations, and a lot of procedural animation. This piece, by the way, does have a voxelized GAN generated artwork in the background. But the animations themselves are not necessarily AI GAN based. And actually, this piece I thought we'd look at quarantine cycles, because it was in triptych. It's in 3 pieces, because it was kind of my commentary on the lockdown.
Wow, that's a trip. Can you sort of give us a little bit of background
Yeah,
behind that piece?
well, the first part is she's just, being glitched, and the furniture is being glitched. And the second part, there's the battle of the left and right, the rise of Bitcoin and Ethereum and cryptocurrencies, which happened with the pandemic, in terms of the bull run. And then the third part is sort of like this kind of like levitation, and then everything crashes down. But I just wanted to point out something. One of the first comments on the internet about this piece was, "Look at those red shoes with nowhere to go." And I cracked up when this woman wrote that, because she totally picked up on that, and that's what I love, where you can sometimes put in, like, I put in a lot of little symbols in my pieces, but I love it when people totally get it and run with it. And she said that was exactly the perfect image of the lockdown for her, the red shoes on the floor and nowhere to go. So that's another thing that I really like, when I kind of see that people are really paying attention to my pieces and looking at all the other layers. This is a pretty well-known piece, because that's actually the New York Stock Exchange building. And so that's Crypto Art Rides the Bull in front of the New York Stock.
Yeah, I remember with Stella Bell.
Yeah. So this is actually another one of the pieces. Let me just quickly come to, and then last January, that's the Wall of All the Glitch Goddesses, which was an exhibition at Vellum LA. In Los Angeles last March, as part of Artsy's NFT drop for International Women's Month. And just really quickly, the first NFT I did was for 2022. This was actually this. So which I kind of prevised. It was on Vertical Crypto Art, and it went to a traditional art collector, and I prevised it for fun. Um, in a contemporary interior.
Wow, I love that artwork. I love the colors in that artwork.
Actually, yeah, that's the colors in that are very much, kind of like my favorite too, for sure. And which sort of brings us out to these different generative NFT projects I did. And actually, let me just stop desktop sharing and get the files together for that. So this, something that, when I started coming into the NFT space and selling NFTs in 2020, and then 2021, I sold a lot of pieces. And it's something that really bothered me, is a lot of people on the internet, as they were commenting on the work, would say things like, "I wish I could afford your work." And I mean, honestly, being into this sort of democratizing ideals, off the internet, it kind of bothered me that people can't afford my work. And so I said, I promised everybody in 2021 on my social media that I would create affordable people. I think even you complained about it. And I said I would create affordable pieces because I kind of believe in that, and I really respect artists like Picasso and Dali who did that, who created different price points,
Yeah.
so people could, and people of all walks of life could have some work of their art. And I actually believe in that ideal and really wanted to use the technology as a way of experimenting with that. So I did these sort of generative projects this last year. And the first generative project I did was Mauer, the Berlin Wall Memorial NFT. It's a project I'm really proud of because I'm a political refugee from Iran, and we're going to talk about Iran shortly. And I really wanted to work with this because I believed in the people who escaped the Berlin Wall. And so I did a generative project. So the Berlin Wall was up for like 10,000, I don't know, 300 days. So it's a typical 10K NFT project. And they selected 5 artists to do 2,000 chunks. And so I did what's probably the first NFT generative project with complex 3D animation and music as traits. So there's 6-7 traits which include the 3D animation. So I focused on the famous escapes from East Berlin because I wanted to celebrate average everyday people who had to find the heroes and sheroes within to escape. And so many people were killed escaping the East Berlin. So I mean that was a horrific tragedy, but it was also the idea of celebrating the courage and the bravery of German people prior to unification who escaped for freedom, who escaped to be reunited with their family or loved ones or whatever, and to really, as part of the Berlin Wall, NFT memorial. So I researched it. I used authentic, communist East German posters. That's one of the traits. So let's just let me get some of that up. So,
yeah, I mean that is exactly what you want to see, that people sort of aspire for freedom and liberty.
Yeah,
And
exactly. So actually, this is so this is one of them. So let me go back to the other. I got too many browsers open.
I know the problem.
I'm talking and I'm like clicking and I'm like, oh my God, I got too much open.
Okay. I've trained myself to close browsers.
I know. So this is before I actually play this, 50% of the proceeds go to democracy funds and Ukrainian refugees. I think with my section, we've sold around $160,000 so far. In the pre-sales, like I think about 1,200 have sold already out of the 2,000, and so that's already paid for the evacuation of 20,000 Ukrainian refugees from Ukraine to Germany. And it was also, I should mention, it was exhibited in Berlin Arts Week as well. So this is one of them. So the music, and because David, I did a lot also with the, hold on. I did a lot with the David Bowie, Hero soundtrack, and there's actually one of the rarest has the Bowie, by the way, poster. I actually found the poster for the David Bowie concert. David Bowie gave a concert, by the way, in East Berlin. That was actually in West Berlin, next to the wall. So people in East Berlin could hear the concert. And that actually was quite a big deal. So let me pause this. And before I actually play this,
the Bowie is a very remarkable figure.
Yeah, so the music, I wanted David Bowie guitar, But during the huddle with the collectors, as I brought it up, there was like 120 collectors showed up, and they were all from all over the world. In the chat, they all said, "No, you have to use Pink Floyd's The Wall." So the musician I work with, Blake Skipper, S3SH, sorry, I forget his whatever his other name, but he sort of wanted to uh so he did this sort of like more of a Pink Floyd guitar, the Gilmore, but I also wanted the electric guitar because it exemplified the spirit of individuality and rebellion from the 1960s and 70s and the 80s, which was a big part of the end of the Soviet Union and the Eastern, Berlin Wall, etc. So we really wanted to bring back the guitar of that era. And just to let you know, in terms of the other traits, there's the background, there's the security layer, the walls. I did about 10 different walls in 3D CG, and that poster that is actually the original David Bowie poster
Wow.
for the concert he did in West Berlin. And so let's look at this one. So there's 5 men and 5 women, and of all ages. And so that's Mauer, that's on OpenSea. And so that's a project I'm really kind of proud of. And because of the money it raised for all the Ukrainian refugees. And the other philanthropic example of generative NFTs for social impact, of course, is the Good Society. Now, the Good Society is committed to creating these. Let me actually share this desktop again. I'm like getting them up in the background. So the Good Society, in part, this was actually to save elephants. So it's the idea is the giants of the metaverse help save the giants of the earth. So giants of the metaverse saving the giants of the earth. So these are a combination of African and Asian elephants. It was done in partnership with the Good Society, which does generative NFTs with social impact, and Space for Giants, which helps elephants, Wildlife Conservation Fund, and the Aspinall Foundation. It's on Carbon Clean Tezos. Its minting is by invitation right now, but we're very close to them opening up to public. And like for me, one of the things that I wanted to do, and I said, and there's also 2 animations from these, which I've also finished. I can't really show them right now because they have to show it, and they haven't shown them yet, but they will show it, so you'll see them soon. But so yeah, I did add elephants in my style of animation. But to me, this was a really exciting project. Well, I love Asian and African elephants, and but it was once again an interesting approach to, what is art in the 21st century? Is it just something for a private collector? I've sold to a lot of private collectors, so that's not the issue. But for me, it was also about exploring other forms for art with this generative NFT model. And so there's also 6 traits for the elephants with 10 variations each. Combination of African and Asian elephants, and the rare ones are the Asian elephant family and the African elephant family. So these were, some of the notable projects. And of course, last spring, I did the Glitch Gods for Quantum NFT. And so what I did is I did basically 20 animations with music of Glitch Gods, which sold out in a minute, all 20 of them. They're trading on OpenSea. And the whole idea for these, actually, let me quickly get up some of the, yeah. So the idea with these was to explore the post-human male. So I have like 3 of them together. I believe this one is the Candyman glitch, the Bull Run glitch, and the Black and White Moire glitch. So the idea was to explore the post-human male. And so during a lot of the talks that I was doing, I think the idea that a lot of the male collectors came up with while we were talking, doing some of the talks to promote these, actually, sorry, was that the posthuman male is a pretty complex phenomenon. But it's also a varied phenomenon. So this one is from left to right, the Pig Elvis glitch. The middle one is the superhero glitch, and the one on the right is, I believe, the jester. Yeah, the jester glitch.
Ah, yeah, I see. Wow.
And I think this is another one from left to right. Let me play the animation on that. So this one is the rocket on the left. Now it's weird. Everybody loves the green cowboy. Why? I have no idea. And the one on the right is actually my personal favorite. It's the roller. And the reason is because it was one of those magical moments that happens where, all the notes that I work with just suddenly work together perfectly to produce something really extraordinary. But the gist of the posthuman male, that what we finally arrived at, and let's look at this one is the samurai, sorry, the warrior glitch on the left, which is kind of suggestive of a samurai. The middle one is the mover and shaker glitch, and the one on the right is up and down glitch.
Cool. Oh yeah, I see.
Yeah, so and I think the interesting idea that emerged out of this project was that the posthuman male is many different things. It isn't sort of stuck in older ideas of manhood. It is fun, it is open, it is creative, it's not afraid of its feminine side, but it has very much a masculine side. Actually, you know what? I think we missed the quarterback glitch, which is the most. Let me find the quarterback glitch while I'm talking. So it's weird because all the collectors, with the exception of two, I believe, were male, but they all sort of got those ideas, which I thought was interesting. And to me, that's another perfect example of how I discover things through my artistic practice. Because let me just share again. Sorry, because I forgot the most masculine one. So let me get the most masculine one up.
There we go.
So the one on the left is the quarterback, sort of American football quarterback. The middle one is the scorpion. By the way, the collector of the scorpion loves his scorpion. And to be honest with you, I don't know him very well, but judging from his crypto art collection and his Twitter presence and our occasional DMs, it's perfect for him. And the one on the right is I forget the name of that one, but yeah. So
Well,
to me,
I have to admit the Scorpio one is really cool.
yeah. See, there you go. But to me, that's like what's fascinating. I mean, as I was kind of exploring all these different ideas of the post-human male aesthetically, suddenly I also realized, wow, men have changed, and as people gave me feedback on these pieces, I started to realize it's not just women who have changed, men have changed. And manhood is so much more complex now than it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And a lot of it owes to the internet and the freedom for
Yeah.
men to be different things that the internet has created. So, to me, it's another perfect example of how I sort of, you go for these, you go with this sort of open approach to a particular idea artistically and aesthetically. And then what emerges is these amazing discoveries. For me, it was, I really felt and saw that. And then I also felt and saw it in how men related to these pieces. But I
Yeah.
think we're tight on time. So go on. Sorry. Yeah.
No problem. I really enjoy it, and I think you're right. And I think it's also the back and forth, right, with women emancipation and how men reacted on that and how women reacted on that, right? So there's also the back and forth that's going on there, and of course the wealth that has been created.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree with that too. But let's just quickly talk about Iran. Last
yeah.
November, during when I was doing my Freeze London my Freeze London art hack. It was like the beginning of the protests in Iran over Masa Amini and, woman, life, freedom, the slogan, the first, woman led and woman centered political revolution in the world. And, I just can't believe the bravery of the Iranian people in the face of what is probably one of the most horrifically totalitarian regimes in our world. And let me just share what I did for that art hack, because I think it says a lot of what I'm going to say, but in an art. So let's see what I did. And once again, keep in mind, I do these art hacks as they're happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the best way to say it, right? Through art. I can hear it. I think I can hear it.
Wait a second. Did you say you can't hear it?
I can hear it. I
Oh,
can hear it.
sorry.
But I can't see it. But it is really terrible what happened there, and it's still ongoing, right, as we speak. We have to wait a little bit.
By the way, that last clip was from the protests, and they're singing a song that goes back to.
Oh, you didn't share it. We have to.
I
I
didn't.
think you closed the window.
Okay. So did you see it or
Ah,
not?
no, no, no. Yeah, you have to play it again.
Okay. So let me cue it to the beginning, and the music was, of course, the Battle song which went viral. And actually, somebody was saying they were considering it for a Grammy for like internet song or whatever. But this is the Denny Asadi remix. So I apologize. So let's just play it again.
No problem. But no sound.
Yeah, so the song they're singing is from the constitutional revolution in Iran 100 years ago, which is about, the blood of the tulips grow from the blood of the people, the youth, namely the revolutionaries. So those women were coming from a political protest in Iran, and they were covered in blood from somebody who had been shot. And they were singing that song, and they posted that video to the internet, and I used it. And also that was from Freeze London. And let me just quickly show what I did for Art Basel, which was to continue the dialogue. Uh, in terms of Iran, I used the same song again, and so we'll just quickly. So Yeah, I think what is happening in Iran is really important to the sort of global narrative right now, because people all over the world are starting to engage it. And I feel like, you sort of look at Tiananmen Square. That I kind of think of like these sort of epic moments in my lifetime. We were talking about Berlin Wall and what it was like when the Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Union ended, not with bloodshed, but in relatively peaceful revolution, thanks in large part to the leadership of the USSR, who wanted to see that change. So we have these like incredibly beautiful moments. The USSR ending, the Berlin Wall coming down, the Eastern European countries getting free. Although there was some war with the breakup of Yugoslavia, Serbia, Bosnia, etc., and that was tragic. I don't mean to minimize that, but still, when you look at the big picture, it really was astonishing. But then we also have Tiananmen Square, when the aspirations of people for freedom were met with the most horrific oppression imaginable. And with Iran, there have been so many successive waves of uprising against the regime that have been brutally suppressed, brutally. And so there's this sort of, like people can't, like I see this everywhere. Everybody's rooting for the Iranian people. I, of course, naturally am rooting for the Iranian people, but I see so many people who are not Iran, who are rooting for it, because it's almost like they understand the struggle of the Iranian people. And what I think is really important for the global audience is, there's that quote on Twitter: "The world lost its moral conscience with Syria." I agree. The world lost its moral compass and conscience with Syria. And it's like, and what is happening in Ukraine, I think, is horrifying. And I totally side with the Ukrainian people. But with Iran, there's this sort of desire on the part of the global community to see the people of Iran freed for many reasons. Obviously, they deserve that freedom. They have fought for so long and so hard. They absolutely deserve it. Secondly, the regime is just a horrifically oppressive regime, not just for the Iranian people, but all the people of the Middle East. When you look at its sponsorship of civil war and terrorism and armed militias and every other horrifying thing that's plaguing the Middle East right now, can directly be traced to the mullahs. I have friends from South America who blame the mullahs for the narco terrorist economy in South America. So I'm saying even South Americans are like complaining about the mullahs in Iran. What is happening in Iran really requires eyeballs from all the netizens and all the citizens of the internet, all the people. We ask that you don't abandon the Iranian people. Click on the stories, engage the news, and make sure that this story is not buried, that it
Yeah,
gets enough eyeballs. Because people ask me, what can I do? And I tell them, click on every major news story about the Iranian Revolution. Click on anything you see on the internet that is talking about how the people are suffering. I mean, today we heard about a soccer player who's sentenced to death. An actress was arrested. But yesterday there was a story of a physician, a doctor, a woman doctor who was treating injured people who had been shot during the protests. And she ran out of medical supplies, and she said, "I'm going to go out and get medical supplies from a nearby clinic." And she was arrested and tortured to death. She's a physician. She was killed. They handed her body. You know how many young people's bodies are handed to their families after they were tortured to death? And this is a moment that all of us have to take pause. Homicide is horrible and tragic, regardless of what form it takes. I agree. But there's something incredibly evil about torturing a human being to death. When
I
somebody dies from torture, you have to pause and go, this is a truly evil regime that does this all the time, that kills people this way. You torture them to the point where they die.
yeah, yeah. No, I cannot say anything, but I agree with what you said. It's horrific. And I think the world is going through a very dark phase at the moment, and I think it's responsibility for people everywhere, and especially the people on social media, to sort of expose these inhumanities and to band together as human beings and to sort of make the world a better place, right? I mean, we have to expose these horrific situations and yeah, and that's also why I sort of got into crypto, right? I mean, some people got into it for the money, and it's nice to make a buck, right? I can't deny it, but I especially like the idealism behind sort of the decentralization, right? I mean, these horrific regimes, they come from the centralization of power,
No, I
and
agree.
yeah,
I think a
and it's
lot
and
of I think a lot of young people are attracted to crypto because it's about an alternative to the hegemony, to the sort of global hegemony, which right now consists of the convergence of governments, corporations, big pharma, tech, and the security apparatus, you know.
yeah.
And it's a lot of people are concerned, rightfully so too. And crypto and Web3 is increasingly, and decentralized finance and decentralized other decentralized systems are really about people finding viable alternatives and options to the current hegemony.
Yeah, and it's a way to protest peacefully, right? I mean, because you also don't want riots in the streets and people destroying each other's property, right? That's also not the way to move forward, right? You want
No,
to do
I
it.
agree. I think you know, riots are really destructive. I mean, in the United States, we see a lot of the violent protests, impacting immigrants the most because the stores that get destroyed belong to immigrants, and oftentimes enough these immigrants don't carry enough insurance to rebuild back their stores, so you have poor families being literally wiped out. So that and so to me that's wrong too. You don't want to destroy a poor immigrant family store and life savings in order to protest. So absolutely, I'm totally opposed to violent protests. Although in the case of countries such as Iran, it's a little bit different because many of the protesters have had to resort to violence as self-defense. And I think that in a situation where you're dealing with an authoritarian regime, it's different. But I think in democracies, there has to be some awareness that destruction of people's livelihood is wrong, and it should not happen within the context of protest.
Yeah, and then one sort of final piece is also, right, when you are in Bitcoin long enough and in crypto in general, right, you sort of learn to take responsibility, right? I mean, because of the ups and downs and the mistakes that you learn to not make them again, right? So you sort of learn to take responsibility for your actions and to seek the problem within yourself, right? And that's also what Jung talks, right? It's not about projecting the problems outward, but trying to solve the problems within yourself in order to make society a better place.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I want to thank you for being on the show. I really love this discussion, and I love your art, and I think you're doing an amazing job of making the world a better place. And I also really appreciate you speaking out for the Iranian people.
Yeah, no, it's one of the more, I think, important David and Goliath moments in our world. And if the Iranian people can be triumphant, which I I I think I'm expecting at this point, because I really don't. I mean, if the regime hasn't fallen this month, to me, it doesn't mean anything because I really don't see how this regime can survive in the long term. Because the majority of the population openly and clearly has expressed the fact that they don't support this regime and they don't want this regime. And I think the regime, through its brutal suppression, has made it impossible for itself to have any type of legitimacy left. You know, when you take national heroes, a national, you know, a top wrestler, a top soccer player, and you kill them, you know,
Yeah.
the mess when you wage war on your people the way this regime has killed, you know, children on the streets. When you resort to this, you basically are declaring that there's no way you have any legitimate rule of any kind. You're waging war against your own people, and the world is now behind the Iranian people in overthrowing this regime.
Yes, it's basically moral bankruptcy, right? And
Total
then
moral bankruptcy. Yeah, this regime has closed all the doors. You know, it can't survive at this point. It's just a
well,
question of how long does it want to prolong the inevitable.
let's do our best to end it and
Mhm.
to make a better future for all Iranians and
And
hopefully
the
for all.
last thing I also wanted to say is that the majority of the Iranian opposition groups through their social media, including people who are inside of Iran, have repeatedly asked for this type of support from Europeans and Americans to pressure their governments not to save the mullahs in Iran by throwing $90 billion to them, because they will use that money to kill Iranian people and people throughout the Middle East. So the request of Iranian opposition groups of Western populations is to pressure their leadership not to cut any nuclear deal or any other kind of deal that financially rewards this murderous, authoritarian, and totalitarian, brutal regime.
Yeah, and that's of course often the problem, right? The geopolitical dealings and wheelings that are going on.
Don't save the mullahs by giving them a nuclear deal or any money.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's another maybe final thing to say. A good thing about Bitcoin, but maybe also gold, right? If you take away the economic power from the elite, it gives it back to the people, and then you don't have these wheelings and dealings on an international scale.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been great. As you
Thank you again for being on the show. I really loved it, and I hope to have you back soon and keep
yeah,
making the amazing art.
awesome. Thank you. Bye bye.